Can't get enough of Team Pete? Well, you've come to the right place, as each week I interview supporters of Pete Buttigieg, former candidate for President of the United States and current Secretary of Transportation. Hear their personal stories about why they became part of Team Pete and how they started a movement. Join us as we talk Pete, politics, and anything in between. Hi everyone, my name is Kim Ang and I am the host of this podcast, Talking with Team Pete, and today my special guest is Marsha Fleming. Hi Marsha.
Hi.
Hi, thank you so much for joining me today. Happy Sunday.
Thank you. Yes. Hope everybody has a good week to come.
Yeah, exactly. Could you go ahead and introduce yourself and where you're from? I understand you're from Indiana, so if you can tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you got involved with Team Pete in the first place.
Well, that's right. I'm Marsha Fleming. I live in Vincennes, Indiana, which is in the southern part of the state, very close to the Illinois border. We're right on the Wabash River between Illinois and Indiana. I actually grew up in Illinois, but my mom is originally from this area on the Illinois side of the river where I live now, and lived in Indiana for about 18 years. So according to local parlance, that means I'm new here.
Oh, really?
Even though I have ties to the area and relatives who live here. But I first became aware of Pete back when he first ran for the DNC chair. And a person who's in the same business segment that I'm in, we were at a trade show, and he's from northern Indiana, and he said, boy, you really need to keep an eye on this guy, Pete Buttigieg. You know, he's the mayor of South Bend, he's running for DNC chair. And it seemed to me like at that time I'd been aware, I'd seen him on a news program or something as people were announcing that they were going to run for DNC chair. So that kind of put him on my radar. And then I kind of found out, he had run for Indiana treasurer. You know, he's the mayor of South Bend, started doing a little more reading that way. But even at that point, you know, wasn't really super politically aware. I mean, I read the news and did all those things, but really wasn't staying really close and tied with lots of local politics, especially in Indiana, because like I said, I'm from Illinois, and, you know, you kind of keep touch there, and wasn't really aware of things that were going on in Indiana. But then after the DNC chair race, and then when people started announcing for running for president in 2020, then I think like a lot of people, you know, saw was it the Fox News town hall, one of the first things, or was it the CNN?
I think that's CNN.
Right. So then I was kind of like, oh, okay. And then there was exploratory committee and all those things. So, you know, I don't know. I got online and made a donation, I think, for exploratory committee. And then like a lot of people, you kind of go down that Pete rabbit hole, you know, start looking up other YouTube videos and things like that. And right about that time is, you know, probably like February, early March of 2019, I said to my wife, you need to be looking at this too. You know, I kind of turned her onto that. And then as soon as it said there's going to be an announcement April 14th, I was like, okay, right. Like the day I heard that, I made a hotel reservation in South Bend. I said, we're going, you know, and at that point I kind of decided, you know, Pete's the guy. I liked a lot of other candidates. I remember Amy Klobuchar's announcement speech in the snow and all of that. And I always liked her, but I knew that Pete was the guy. And the other thing I told my wife was, you know, this is history making. So we need to be in South Bend, if nothing for the history, no matter how it turns out, we need to be there. And so, you know, from that point on, we were both pretty much, you know, all in and on board. Team Pete.
Yeah. So what was it about him initially that just made you feel like he's your guy?
I definitely think just the way that he speaks, you know, you feel very comforted. You know, we've been in a time of a lot of strife, a lot of political polarization. And then I just felt like this is someone that a lot of people can get behind because, you know, he takes policy and breaks it down to where it's talking to people where they are, and the fact that, you know, this is how it's affecting you, this is how it's affecting a lot of people negatively, and here's some of the things we can do to change that. And so I just thought, you know, I think this is someone who can appeal to a wide range of people. And still to this day, every time I, you know, see him on television or hear him speak, I'm just very comforted by that. And also the fact that, you know, I'm a kind of a cusper baby boomer Gen Xer. My dad fought in World War II. I was born in 1964, but he was a lot older than my mom. So we kind of had that boomer influence, especially for myself and my next brother in our home. Our 7 years younger brother, not so much. He's definitely Gen X, but I felt like this is definitely a time for generational change as well. So I felt like, it's time for younger people to start taking up the mantle and getting involved seriously in public service for the long term.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely time to pass the torch on to the younger generation. A lot of our politicians have been in office way too long, and but speaking of that, you mentioned that you were elected to the position on the Democratic at the local level, right?
Right. So, after the 2020 election in Indiana, our political parties elect new leadership in what we call the off year. So the year after a presidential year would be the time that parties elect new county chairs, and then county chairs elect new district chairs, and district chairs elect a new state chair. And we were I kind of realized we were in a generational change, or even a philosophical change with our Indiana state party. So I felt like things had kind of gone a little fallow, that a lot of people were kind of resting on the laurels of the past, and we had in the meantime lost a lot of races and offices at every level, at the city's level, at the county's level, at the district level, at the state level. And so, if kind of taking a page from the P book is sometimes you have to be bold, and sometimes you have to, if not me, who kind of thing. Although I will say I was kind of a reluctant candidate. A lot of people had asked me to run or said to me that they thought I should run, but I spent a lot of hours on the telephone trying to get someone else to run. Someone younger or someone more experienced, and all types of different people. Again, a young woman, an older elected official, a male. And so I was spending lots of time on the phone saying, yeah, you should run for chair. You run for chair. We need some change. And no one was emerging. And so I was sitting here, the caucus was on a Saturday, and I said to my wife, I kind of yelled from the other room, and I said, what would you think if I ran for chair? This was like on a Monday night before the caucus on Saturday. And there was kind of a pause, and she said, well, I think you have to do it. So, I'm not going to say she reluctantly came on board, but she knew that it was a big job, and that there was a big job ahead of us. And I think she was just concerned, for, how that would play out, and would we stay married? Just all the things, that I'm sure every couple goes through when one person is considering running for any office. Especially a public one, but, so I did, threw my head in the ring, and it turned out I was unopposed. And in that week between deciding, or 5 days between deciding and the caucus, I reached out to other people, and I said, hey, I'm going to do this, but would you run for vice chair? For example, in Indiana and really throughout the Democratic Party, we like to have gender parity. So if a female the person needs to be of a different gender than you. So if a female is the chair, then a male or a non-binary person needs to be the vice chair, and so on. And so after the chair and vice chair level, it's not so much one for one, but we try to maintain that gender diversity. So, and that goes back to a time, of course, when women didn't have, a guaranteed seat at the table. And so we try to keep that in all up and down, whether that's national convention delegates, we balance for gender, ethnicity, whether some caucuses, whether someone's involved in a union or that sort of thing. So, it's just making sure everybody has a seat at the table. So I kind of got some feelers out, got some people who said, yeah, if you get it, we'll stand behind you and we'll do it. And that was in March of 2021. So here we are almost a year and a half later, just kind of out there all the time. We had a festival yesterday. We were at, just trying to rebuild things, let people know they're not the last living Knox County Democrat, make it cool to be Democrats again, and just kind of rebuild the party from there.
So is it more of the responsibility of your position? It's more of kind of galvanizing the Democratic Party, and do you help like other candidates to win local races as well? Or
that's a good question. That's a good question, because I think it varies by locale. In general, the party is there, whether at the county level or the state level, to provide a structure. It's to, like you said, galvanize Democrats, point them in the right direction. This is how we conduct a fundraiser for a candidate, for example. This is how we help candidates with anything that they need, canvassing, fundraising, being campaign managers, treasurers, campaign staff, that sort of thing. Some counties get very involved in that process and lead the organization for candidates. At this point, we've not really gone that far in my county just because of resources. We're trying to build up the money that we raise, and there was some basic party infrastructure things that we didn't have that we needed to put our money toward first. Our members felt that it was very important to have a public face in the community, for example. So we joined the Chamber of Commerce. We have a headquarters now. We designed a new logo. We got some new collateral materials, those sorts of things. And so, that was step one. And then now we're kind of moved on to more relational organizing, getting people. And again, shout out to Pete, relational organizing. Who do you know? What are their beliefs? Do their beliefs align with the Democratic Party or vice versa? And so drawing those people in and letting them know why it's so important to be involved, and activating people literally sometimes one by one person. And so, at this point in time, I feel like we have relationships with our current elected officials, the officials who were in office when I came in to be the chair, and candidates we've recruited. That's a big part of what we do, is just recruiting candidates to run, kind of connecting the dots of, who's active on social media talking about different issues, and whether that's at the school board level or the county level, the city level, that sort of thing, and connecting that with where they can put their talents to use in the public sector. So it's a work in progress. It's always a work in progress. And I don't think there's really one set answer for that question. It kind of depends on local tradition and access to resources and human resources more than anything.
Yeah. So how do you get your funding then?
Donations.
Okay.
We have an ActBlue account, and that's something else we didn't have when I took office. We didn't use ActBlue. We weren't using social media and even email that effectively. So just getting all of those things in order. Now, mind you, we still have lots of people, especially people who are older, 70 plus, I'd say, who still want to write us a check. That's great. I will accept your check made out to Knox County Democrats anytime you want to get me one. And then just, myself and the executive committee and precinct chairs, just asking for money and encouraging people to make recurring donations to ActBlue. If 100 people give us $10 a month, that pays for our headquarters, and then that's cash flow that you can count on ongoing, and that provides that solid basis and that bedrock for everything else you do. We meet there, we have community meetings there. Other organizations use our headquarters for their monthly and committee meetings. So, just having that public face in the largest community in the county, I think makes a big difference for people knowing that there is a structure, there is an organization, there's hope for the future.
Yeah. So would you want to run for other offices or anything?
I get that question a lot. I really don't think so. I'm really passionate about getting other Democrats elected. Before I ever wanted to be chair, even before I got involved in Pete for America, I had never given $1 or donated 1 hour to a political campaign since college. And so I think, especially as someone who's white, you just get to a point where in your life where, things are going pretty good and no matter who's the president or the governor, it doesn't really affect me that much. I'm just going to progress in my career and do my thing. And then it takes something jarring to wake you up to say, oh, wait a minute. It's just not just about me, but also is the fact that there's lots of other people who aren't having it so great. And so, we got to stop this in its tracks. So in 2018, then the other thing that kind of hit me over the head, and I know lots of people have known this for a long time, but I thought, really, I can give to a political campaign that's not in my backyard? I could give money to a Senate candidate in another state. I could, if my friend was running for city council in California, I could give money to her. Well, of course I could. I always could. But then that light bulb goes off. And trust me, we put as much money as we can into local candidates, and we have a great congressional candidate and a wonderful statewide slate for state offices and a great Senate campaign or Senate candidate, and lots of our money goes into that as well. But I kind of saw the power of making donations outside of my own congressional district and outside of my own state. So that's what really kind of started getting me to pay more attention to how some of these candidates in other locales were doing. So that maybe kind of was a rambling answer, but I don't think that running for office is past what I'm doing now. It's probably in the cards. Maybe state party leadership at a higher level at some point, but we've got enough work to do here, and I'm committed to that work.
So you like more of the behind the scenes work?
Yeah, I guess. I think one thing I realized in the last year or two is that there's two types of people who get involved in party or political organization work. There's strategists and there's organizers. And I can see a strategy, but I can't necessarily articulate a strategy. I'm more of an organizer. I'm more of a person who really enjoys the activating people one by one, the asking people for money, the staging events, all of those kinds of things. So I consider myself a grassroots organizer. So, I guess a dream would be to not have to work in the real world and do more of that kind of work, whether that's in my area or on a campaign or something like that. But, I'm getting up there in age.
Yeah. Well, it's never too late. We do what we can, right?
Everybody should do what they can do. That's right.
Yeah. So how did you get involved did you volunteer for Pete's campaign you mentioned helping out with the Barnstormers as well. So how did that get started?
It was kind of a parallel track. First, Barnstormers kind of came onto my radar. We went to announcement day in April. Summer was kind of watching what everybody was doing all over the place and seeing clips on the news of people in Iowa and people in New Hampshire, candidates, and that sort of thing. And then I guess it was over Labor Day of 2019. It started just my Facebook feed just blew up with come to Iowa for the Liberty and Justice Dinner. And this was a strategy that worked really well for Obama. I didn't know any of the organizers at that time. I know Julie Parker's been on your pod, and she has since become a really good friend, but I didn't know any of those organizers at that time. My wife and I were on a little holiday down in Kentucky, and I said, I think I should go to Iowa. And she didn't go. I went by myself. But one of the things that the organizers very wisely did coming into that event was they said, we're going to have these state or regional, they called them Pete-ups. And that was also a thing all over the country, different Indianapolis for Pete, and different organizations were having Pete-ups where they could get together at a bar or restaurant or coffee shop and meet people and start to organize and have events and that sort of thing. So they were going to have a statewide Pete-up for Indiana at the LJ. So I said, well, I'll help with that. I'm the organizer and the party thrower and the event manager and all of that. So I said, well, I'll be one of the captains. Well, fortunately for me, two other people stepped up and said they would be captains. And so I lived in Southern Indiana. Jenny Okamoto was in Central Indiana, and Bobby Solomon was in South Bend. And so we kind of had the North, the Central, and the South all covered. We kind of coordinated. I found us a room in the hotel where I was staying, and to have our meeting. And I want to say there's probably 75 people there, and that didn't even include buses coming from South Bend. So it's 75 people who drove on their own dime, on their own time to Des Moines to go to this Barnstormer event, this thing that had basically, emerged and grown in 8 weeks' time. And so, so there we were, and that meeting right there kind of solidified what became the basis for Pete for Indiana. And up until the day that he got out of the race, we were, kind of planning for the future and getting a ground structure, a volunteer ground structure, obviously not paid, and if someone gets to that point and they become the nominee, then of course resources come and there are more field organizers and that sort of thing. But we were already getting a field volunteer structure in place, people in each congressional district who were kind of the lead. And then those people and others, these people will do logistics in Southern Indiana, and these people work on housing in Central Indiana or whatever, anticipating when paid people would be coming into the area, to do field organizing. Can we find housing for them? Can we set up a network of people who, have access to other resources, venues to hold events, all of that. So that work was happening on the ground, with a mostly volunteer structure, with some other people who'd been basically with the who were in Indiana, but had been with the campaign or who were from South Bend, from the beginning. So that was the big thing. So Barnstormers kind of lit that on fire, but then in parallel to that, and again, mostly Barnstormers, but others were working on a ground structure, were he the nominee or kept moving forward. So that was all kind of happening at the same time. And it was really an exciting time too. Yeah.
Did you and your wife ever have people staying at your house who were part of the campaign, like volunteering and canvassing and all that stuff?
We didn't get that far because our primary in Indiana is in May. And in fact, in 2020, because of COVID, it was pushed back to June. So even anticipating a May primary, we were very, very late. And so when he went out at the end of February, 1st of March, that was pretty well. And so at that point, we kind of pivoted that original volunteer grassroots org kind of pivoted a little bit to, what are we going to do statewide to help other statewide candidates? And then those who are involved in Barnstormers, pivoted with Barnstormers USA, United for Biden, that sort of thing. Signs Across America, those things that we did over the summer of 2020.
Wow. Thanks to people like you and all the Barnstormers and all these amazing boots on the ground people. I'm just so in awe of what you guys do. It's amazing, the time that you put in, the money and all that to just galvanize people. It's really amazing.
You know what I think was the biggest thing, besides Pete himself, of course, the biggest thing that the campaign did that I still think was a stroke of genius and that more campaigns would be wise to emulate. And I don't know if you remember this, but if you went to the original Pete for America website, where they, explained the bridges and the logo and all the stuff that they did, and that was Design Toolkit. You remember that? So you could go on the website and there was a whole module on the website where you could go and see all the colors, the theme colors that they used, what was the meaning of all the colors, and then all of these kind of pre-made graphics, all the state little logos, Indiana for Pete, Massachusetts for Pete, all of that kind of stuff. Because going into the LJ, it was amazing to see on Facebook all of the swag and the merch and everything that people were generating, again, on their own dime, on their own time, bringing buttons and stickers and hats. And Barnstormers had a whole t-shirt series and a whole button series. Of course, that's Julie's business with the buttons and everything. But how amazing it was to all that crowdsourcing. I don't even want to think about how much money all of that was, and I might have spent a couple of $100, but when you put everyone's couple of $100 together, it was very, very powerful, the amount of stuff that was out there. And I don't know that I saw that from any other campaign or to nearly that level of dedication and, but we had the tools to do it. You had design toolkit. It wasn't like you're going out and reinventing the wheel or doing something that you felt wasn't authorized. They put the graphics out there. So that's the tacit, permission to go and do all of this stuff. And it was just, it was brilliant. They never could have gotten, I think, the name recognition and all the things that, Pete got out of that for his own, career without putting that piece out there first.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah. That was pretty cool. And I remember seeing like so many of our own local organizers here printing out their own, merch and stickers and whatnot and passing them out with the volunteer initiation thing that they did where they tell you what the rules were how you get involved and stuff like that. Yeah, so that was really amazing. All the effort that people put in, their own time and money, and then so you go. It's the orientation is what I was trying to say. And so from there, they just said, okay, here's the tools, and you guys can go out and do whatever you want in your local community. And so that's what my partner and I did too. We printed out stuff and did our setup at the farmers market on Sundays, and so just to get his name out there.
Right.
That was easier for me to do because it wasn't knocking on doors. I'm terrified of that. I went once with the Pete group, and then we have to break up into partners, and so this lady that I went with, I made her do all the talking and all the knocking, and I just said, I'm staying back here. I'm just here for moral support.
I'm here to smile and make sure that this person has a friend, a buddy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so the farmers market tabling was less terrifying for me because then people could just come to our table and talk to us if they wanted to. So yeah.
Well, I tell you one thing that I've taken from that experience that I use in my work with my county and here in Indiana, and that is everyone should do what they do best, and that there's a place for everybody to get involved. I love canvassing. I love knocking on doors. I love talking to people. I wasn't that good at it to start with, but I'll tell you where I learned a lot, and that was Barnstormers took a trip in December to New Hampshire and went to Manchester, and that was a good time. The LJ was so crazy, and there were so many people, and of course there's a ton of people in Des Moines, and you have all organizers for every campaign, and you have lots of media. There's just a lot of people there, and you're going from event to activity to event to event to, and because we had those state meetups, and again, this was key. This isn't a criticism of that whole experience. After I met more people from Indiana, especially since I'd come by myself, I stuck with people from Indiana. Then the subsequent trips to all the rest of the early states, to New Hampshire, and then to Nevada, and then to South Carolina, back to Iowa for the caucus, and then to South Carolina. That was really, cementing more relationships with people from other places. And so in New Hampshire, I paired up with Leanne and Steve Dobro, who were from Massachusetts, and they had been driving up to New Hampshire literally every weekend for weeks, knocking on doors for Pete in anticipation of the New Hampshire primary. And so I learned so much from them. I mean, the two of them had a system down, who would talk and what would they do, and what, they would take turns. One would be the scribe filling out the Post-it that we left on the door or doing the notes in the van. And then the other one would be the talker. And then the next block they would switch. And so I was in New Hampshire and didn't have a car. So I just kind of, they said, come tag along with us. Great. And I learned so much from them. And then that allowed me the next time, to take on a different partner, someone who was like you and concerned about it and feeling awkward and weird. And hopefully, whether you did it one time or did it 100 times after that, you're kind of spreading that information down the line, the best practices and stuff like that. So, but there again, one of my very best friends that I was aware of in Iowa that first time, but got to know really well in New Hampshire, and that was Laura Cato. She lives in South Carolina, and she's kind of Barnstormer famous. Laura hates to campus, calling you out. I know you're going to hear this. I'm calling you out, but she's a postcarder. And this woman has literally, since 2019, written thousands of postcards, postcards to swing states, postcards about ballot initiatives, postcards to Georgia, all these things. So that's not my favorite. I have done it because I feel like in some of those downtimes when there's nothing else going on, that's something everyone can do. Not my favorite. But so there's a place for everyone. And there's, whether you love to bake cookies or whether you love to talk to people or whether you like to ask for money or do the social media or whatever, there is a job for everyone. And again, whether you have an hour a week to spend or 10 hours a week or make it your full-time job in retirement, there is a place for everyone. And that's what we try to reinforce and make everyone feel welcome. So kind of goes back to the rules of the road, belonging, want everyone to feel like that their time and their talent and their, time away from their family is put to good use and that that all of that is valued. Yeah. I think belonging is one of one of my favorite rules of the road too, and I'm sure you and I and everybody else have the same feeling of this sense of family that we've kind of created through this volunteering process, isn't it? I mean, it's quite remarkable all the people that you were able to keep in touch with throughout the campaign and even after, and now, like you said, are really good friends. Absolutely. That to me is something that will outlive all of us. Is those bonds and the things that we've created. When you said earlier about, did you have organizers or people stay at your house? No, but I've had other barnstormers stay at my house.
Oh, nice.
On the way from here to there, or people stop through and visit us because they were passing through town, or Laura and I went on vacation together and some other barnstormers came to our condo and had dinner. So those kinds of things, will go on for as long as we live. Yeah. I actually talked to Laura before already, and I'm just amazed at her postcard. And last year, she and I and a few other people went to the Women's March for Reproductive Rights in Washington last October. So, she's pretty active. Nice. She's a barnstormer superstar. Yeah, definitely. I was very happy to have been able to speak with her. Well, I'll look forward to that episode. So earlier you mentioned that Pete's announcement was historic, and that's why you wanted to attend. Could you kind of elaborate on that a little bit? Was it because he was going to be the first openly gay candidate? That, and also the fact that he was from Indiana. Was another big thing. But definitely the fact that he was the first openly gay candidate. And, of course, the first openly gay person to get delegates. Pete won Iowa. So for everyone listening who doesn't think that, I was there that night. Pete won Iowa. Pete knew he won Iowa. Right. We all knew he won Iowa. Just the historic nature of all of those things. And I'm kind of one of these weird planners too, where if I might want to go to something, I'll get a hotel room right then and not wait, because then prices go up and, you might not get that. So you can always cancel it, but you can't always get one at the last minute. So, so it was kind of one of those things. And we went, and we, in fact, were one of the last groups they were like counting people off in groups of 25, and you would go into the hangar, the manufacturing building there at Studebaker. We were the last group of 25 to be indoors, So I was very thankful for that. It was freezing. It was raining on us, but it was just pure joy. It was just pure joy. We couldn't even see Pete from where we were standing, and there was no big monitors, none of the things that there would be later on in the campaign. So we were kind of way off to one side, and it was a long, narrow building. And of course, it was facing toward the dais was facing toward the short, across the short part of the building. But just being there, and, she and I have been together for 13 years. We've been married since 2016. So it was historic, and it was very important to us to be there. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's about representation, right? Just having someone who can represent you and your family and your life, and, it's quite
heartwarming, I guess, to know that there's someone up there who will be looking out for you. Really.
Yeah. I think since that time, we've had to realize in Indiana, and I think it's probably more acute, especially if you live in South Bend, that this person who was their mayor, who was, born and raised Hoosier, I know he still considers himself a Hoosier, but it gets hard to see that person doesn't belong just to you anymore. He belongs to everyone. And I'm getting a little choked up because last weekend, Indiana Democrats had our big summer meeting. It's called the IDEA, which is actually stands for, people think it's idea, like getting ideas, but it's the Indiana Democratic Editors Association. It was originally a newspaper group and still is. It's just very small. But this newspaper group had this meeting. It's always been in French Lick. It's 141 years old, to get access to politicians. And it kind of goes back to, back in the Roosevelt years, he had a big thing there with the press to announce his candidacy for president. And French Lick is kind of this resort area in the southern Indiana hills. And Pete actually made an appearance there on a day off. He wasn't there for any official capacity, but of course he'd been to many IDEA conferences over the years. And he came in a week ago last Friday to our conference, and about 500 people who were there, he stood in line. We stood in line, and everyone got to speak to him, get your picture taken, all that sort of thing. And I made a Facebook post, and I said, you never know when someone you admire that you have met and that you have seen several times in public, whether that's at a fundraiser in Indianapolis or whether that's on the set of Morning Joe during the Iowa caucuses, which I was, or on the rope line at the rally right before the South Carolina primary, which I was. You don't know if that person remembers you. So I was one of the first people in line at French Lick, and I had my name tag on that said my name and the logo for our county, and it said chair. And I pointed to my name tag and I said, "This is because of you that I'm able to do this now." And he said, "Well, that really means a lot. Thank you." And I said, "No, thank you." So it was quite a moment.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I remember Pete saying that running for office is an act of hope, right? And so the fact that he inspired you to take action is to try to help and do more. That's pretty remarkable, especially when you didn't even consider doing it, right?
No, I just tell myself every day, we have to do what we can do. And not everybody, there's few people who will do anything, unfortunately. And so those of us who can, should, and in fact, we must. Yeah. So what was your favorite part about all the volunteering and what you've done for Team Pete? Wow, favorite part. I think ongoing, I think the biggest takeaway for me has been, and I don't think I thought about this as my favorite part going through it, but looking back on that time and looking forward to the things I know must be done in the future, and that's rules of the road. I have a close group of friends that we stay in touch pretty regularly, and sometimes we'll vent to one another and we'll say, "Hey, this is not rules of the road," or "This is not even rules of the road adjacent." But I believe it really gives us that framework of doing the right things for the right reasons. And so, I still have that rules of the road original t-shirt. I wear it. I take care of it. I don't wash it in hot water. I don't want it to get all faded because it's black. But a lot of times I have this flannel that matches all the colors almost perfectly. And so sometimes in the winter, I'll wear it and I'll be like, my flannel game is on point today. And my rules of the road game is on point today. But that was is such a revelation, I think, when so many people are so distrusting of government agencies, government entities, politicians. It just kind of gives everyone that inner compass, to always come back to doing the right things for the right reasons. And, there's lots of individual things and people that I've met and things that we've done and stories that we've told and laughs that we had. But at the end of the day, it really comes back to, are you doing the right things for the right reasons? And that's why the rules of the road, still it's always there. It's always running in the background. And that's really powerful.
Yeah, it is. And I felt like, and I've said this to other people too, that his rules of the road is like the gold standard for our politics moving forward. I mean, this is what every campaign should look like. I mean, and I just love the fact that, he was out there representing us. We were out there representing him. And it's like he's the one, the leadership that he possessed, it trickles down to us, right? And how, he makes us look good, so we have to make him look good. Respect, belonging, teamwork. And that's all really what life is all about, right? Joy, doing what we're doing and doing it with joy. So, yeah. That's one of my favorites as well. I'm glad you brought that up because, I still have the rules of the road, like on a mug or something, and constantly looking at that, and because we know the former guy didn't have any of that.
That's right, and I think when everyone was coalescing around Joe Biden, there was a lot of conversation, on Twitter and in Facebook groups about, well, any nominee is going to take on people from other campaigns, just because the pool of people who do that level of work isn't huge. Hopefully most people who want that job are going to find a job within whoever the nominee is. But, everyone was saying at that time, like, I hope that the Pete campaign is really saying, you've got our support, but you need to do this. And this worked really well for us. So please do this. And our supporters will want this. And number one thing was the rules of the road. And so, Joe did come out with his version of the rules of the road, basically. The other thing that we really, really asked for, of course, was design toolkit. And that really didn't happen to a great meaningful degree. But I think there was some logo guidelines and stuff like that. But that was important. And to think how fundamental that became in such a short time and ingrained in everyone in such a short time. But you're absolutely right in that, as goes the leader, so goes the pack. So when you have this leader that's, intensely has intense integrity, you want to emulate that and you want to maintain that and you don't want to do anything to tarnish that.
Right. Yeah, and that was one of the biggest takeaway was how different Pete's campaign and his supporters were compared to other campaigns like Bernie and stuff like that. I mean, I heard about, like the Bernie bros and whatnot and how mean they can be and Bernie didn't come out and tell them to knock it off or anything like that. And so it felt like his campaign was like, bar none above the rest, and I was really happy to be a part of that.
Well, I think it's a matter of, sharing those expectations. So whether you lead a family or a company or a political campaign, if it's your name at the top of the thing, then it's good to outline expectations. That way we knew what was expected and that certain behavior wouldn't be tolerated either. And I think those are things that for decades, people kind of knew those things inherently, or they were taught that through their education or their family makeup or whatever. But, in a society where everyone's a critic and everyone can think they're a news reporter by posting something online, a lot of those rules of polite society just kind of have trickled away from us, and everyone thinks that they should have the agency to say whatever they want to say whenever they want to say it, and and let the chips fall where they may. And that's kind of sad, really, when you think about it. I mean, I think the biggest thing about Pete versus a lot of other candidates is that we didn't want to burn everything down. It's kind of, I think on one hand, that's sometimes can be a human emotion when you get so frustrated with things, you just want to burn it all down. But think how much longer it takes to build something back up rather than, realizing what we have. There are parts that are good and building up those parts while minimizing, the parts that are inherently bad or racist or xenophobic or sexist or anything. It's like, once you know better, do better, Maya Angelou. Yeah. So, that I appreciated, Pete, to be able to say, this is what we have that's so good, and that the deep down, that's our values as Americans. And so, build up the good while minimizing and overcoming the bad.
Yeah, I definitely felt that too, that some of the candidates were just, even if we were to look at the whole Medicare for all, who want it, right? So they want to get rid of everything and put everybody on this government plan. And when I was speaking with Laura, she was talking about how the nurses unions and stuff like that, they have great benefits. So there are those people who do not want to get rid of their benefits. So why would you want to force them into a plan that's not better or anything like that to what they currently have? So it's about finding the problem and trying to solve it rather than taking everything apart and trying to rebuild from scratch when we know how poorly government works right now. So. Oh, gosh. Were there parts of your family, what did they kind of felt about that, about you working for Team Pete and volunteering? Because I know a lot of the people that I've spoken to, when they told their families and friends that they were going to do this, everybody thought they were crazy. Like, why would you, drop everything, go, to Iowa and do all this? So did you have any of that kind of?
I wouldn't say it was ever negative. It was kind of maybe a little, okay. My aunt does a lot of crocheting, and I found some yarn for her because, again, it was going to be cold in Iowa. We went to the LJ, and so, everyone was saying, oh, they have this great scarf at Target that's just the right colors, and there was all these things. What color are you going to paint your nails? This color blue from this, nail polish line is what you should use. And so I found some yarn, and I said, asked my aunt, would you make me this scarf? And she's like, sure, and I said, can you even take this gold and this blue and kind of do it at the same time? And she said, it's a little harder, but yeah, I could do it. So I remember going and picking up the scarf, and she said, if I had longer time, I probably could have done it better. I'm not super proud of it. I said, no, it's perfect. It's great. It's just the right colors. It'll keep me warm. It's great. And she's like, now who's this guy again? So there was that, and then when people start seeing the pictures and things, your tales of your travels and all of that sort of thing, there were some people who would get it right away, just because they'd been involved in politics before, been involved in state politics, or they knew who Pete was or whatever. And, you get comments like, oh yeah, I know who that guy is, or yeah, I like him too. And you hope that, all that positivity and all that good things and all the smiles and all the great people that you're meeting, other people are going to pick up that energy and and maybe take their own journey at that point and find out more about it, or they'll ask you, well, why, and what, and so what's your why to Pete? Just kind of the same thing that you would do in trainings for knocking doors. Think about your why and why, telling people why they should care, why they should take a look at your candidate and everything. So very similar with family members and stuff like that. So really nothing negative. I know there's people in my family who don't necessarily, vote Democratic all the time or vote Democratic at all. But I never got any negative feedback over what I was doing or why. So that was good.
Yeah, that is good. So was there any rift in your family when Trump was when he won? And
there was a little bit. There was a little bit. I would say mostly from family members who I think underestimated the damage that he could do. I remember a family member saying to me via a Facebook post, well, nothing's going to happen with your marriage, or nobody's going to take away any of your rights. And so like after the Dobbs decision, and when Justice Thomas made that concurring opinion about, well, maybe we ought to be looking at some other things like, Obergefell and Lawrence and Griswold versus Connecticut. I was like, for everybody who said other rights aren't in jeopardy, how about this? So I mean, I don't like to be the person who says, I told you so, but, there was a lot of people, trans people, gay people, women who were sounding the alarm, and, a lot of particularly men were saying, oh no, because our norms in this country have been the, peaceful transfer of power, and, on to a certain level, there are some things that will remain static. We'll have a constant national security apparatus, or, Medicare and Social Security will carry on as it's been. And a lot of those things were very much disrupted. I mean, when you look at something as fundamental to daily life as the Postal Service, getting so messed up in the former guy's administration, then I hope people who are in that swing group in the middle are realizing, it does matter who you elect to be the president, because they crashed through the gates of so many norms that had been, in our government for centuries. So it makes you feel that you hope more people are paying at least a little more attention to things like that in the future. But you just, that's all I can probably say about that. But that's disappointing, though, when family members or close friends kind of put it right out there that they're 100% on board with that kind of behavior. And then I think, well, then what you're telling me is because they're making moves against members of the gay community and trans community and stuff like that, you're basically saying that you don't care about me and my marriage and my rights. And that's disheartening, and that's sad. And I know I'm clearly not the only one. There's, millions of people who have felt that same way. And that is sad. And that's another reason not to elect someone like that ever again in the future. People decry the polarization. Well, I'm not saying he caused all of that, but he definitely let a whole lot of stuff out of the box.
Yeah, I mean, it is very disheartening, because I know, like, a friend of mine who is also gay, and she's married to her wife for, I think, 20 years or so now, and she was telling me that her sister, the way that she voted was she voted for the former guy because, well, tax cuts and whatnot. But I'm thinking, well, tax cuts, that's the only reason you would vote for this person, not the fact that, they might, repeal the rights for your sister to be married. I mean, that to me is the disheartening part, is that when you tell somebody that you love them and yet you vote against their rights and whatnot, and it's just,
And honestly, as things move forward, that's kind of the message to that casual or inconsistent voter is, the people that you're electing to your everything from your city and your county council to state general assembly to the state, state office holders, all of that does make a difference in your daily life. And this is some of the ways that those things have been damaged. And so, that's fuel for our fire, to try to get a few more people to realize that. And that's why I do the work that I do.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. And I think the whole Dobbs decision has really fueled a lot of galvanized a lot of the women votes, right? Because I was reading the other day that more new registered voters are women. Mm-hmm. So that's hopeful to see, and what happened in Kansas. And so, hopefully we'll get the right people in office and get things moving, because I think Biden's been doing a really great job. I mean, all those bills that have been passed and very successful so far, and that's with only 50-50 Senate. And so imagine what more can be done for the American people when he has a few more people in the Senate to look out for Americans. So,
and thank goodness for Pete out there telling the story every single day. I mean, when I read synopses of where he's been and what he's doing, not everybody can see every bit of news. I count on Pete stands who are bigger than me to do those kinds of things and keep the whole community informed about this is where Pete was this week or this month and all of the things. And it's quite astounding to have a communicator and just someone who works as hard as he does on the team. And I think that's something that we all should be proud of and thankful for.
Yeah, definitely proud every single day that I see him on TV and being out there and giving the president's message and being such a team player. I mean, he's just the whole package, really.
Right. For sure.
Yeah. So I assume that if he runs or when he runs again, that you'll be there.
Absolutely.
In full force.
Oh, absolutely. I did hear somebody say on one of the shows a few weeks ago, well, we could go, or it might have been even another podcast, we could go 7 more cycles and Pete would not be the age of Joe Biden that Joe Biden is right now. And I'm like, well, I don't think I'm going to make 7 more cycles. I'll be 58 next month. So, but I'm pretty sure it'll happen in my lifetime, and most definitely I'll be there. Team Pete forever. Yeah, Team Pete forever for sure. I know. I'm just hoping it'll happen sooner rather than later, because I don't really want to wait 7 cycles. Totally. And I think when the time is right, he'll know and we'll know, and of course we'll all be there. I think back to the transition when everyone was saying, Pete should do this or Pete should be that, and it's very ironic and interesting to me how it did turn out. Like, who could name another Secretary of Transportation in the history of ever? I mean, I can maybe name 2 just because I remember that Mitch McConnell's wife was the one previous. And during the Obama administration, a congressman from Illinois who used to be my congressman, Ray LaHood, was Secretary of Transportation. But other than those 2, I couldn't name another one, and I think I'm pretty unusual to even be able to name 3 in the last 20 years. So, but he definitely landed in the right spot. That's a good fit for his skills. He's always been an infrastructure guy. In one way or another, having been a mayor and smart streets and smart sewers and all of that stuff. So, he landed where he needed to land in the place where he could be the most effective. Yeah, I was talking to one of the people from Build the Era. They created that site to help with getting, educating the public on what DOT is all about and stuff like that. And I thought, and one of the things that was mentioned was that Pete has been streamlining a lot of the ways in which local cities get grants for the projects that they want to do, and just to make it so much easier for people to apply and cut through the red tape and that and stuff like that. And I thought, he's a problem solver. So it's like, I just wish that he could do that right now as POTUS. Yeah. We all do. It just underscores, though, the fact what an important post a mayor is. I think a lot of people take mayors for granted, But there's a lot of, they have to balance a budget every year, for example, and all the things that go into being a mayor. We have our U.S. Senate candidate in Indiana is Tom McDermott, and he's the 5-term mayor of Hammond, Indiana. And, like Pete, he understands all the hoops that municipalities and local governmental units have to jump through. And so that's really important background to have when you talk about cutting government red tape and make it easier and faster for the tax dollars to get to their intended projects. So I think that's another thing that Pete really brought to the fore was, you can't put someone down just because the city was only 110,000 people, or it was the whatever, biggest city or whatever. You get up to a certain area. If you have 100,000 people or more, those are big problems day in and day out. Whether that's policing or parks or sewers and all of that stuff. And so mayors really get things done, and understand the nuts and bolts, and they're close enough to those problems and the nuts and bolts of things. They see people in the grocery store, they go to ball games, all that kind of stuff. So that's something that I don't think people really thought about nearly as much before. I know I didn't.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's about governing, right? And that's the president's job, is to govern. It's not to pass laws. That's the Congress's job. And so I thought that his skills as a mayor, governing skills, could translate to that national level as president, which I'm sure he would do pretty well. So, yeah. I mean, people forget that it's about governing. It's not so much experience and how long you've been in the Senate or whatever higher position, right? So,
for sure.
Yeah. So, when you met Pete, was he kind of exactly how you imagined him to be?
Oh, pretty much. I just feel I've always felt like he's very, very approachable. From the first time I met him to this past weekend in South Bend, I mean, he does really speak to you as if you're the only person in the room. There's not 500 other people standing right behind you or on the lawn or whatever. The other thing that I was remarking to someone at IDEA last weekend was, if you watch videos of him and also videos of Chasten, before COVID, of course, a lot more hugging going on. But both of those guys, and I'll challenge anybody listening or watching this today, is that both those guys know how to hug. Watch them when they're like on a rope line or with lots of people and stuff like that. They know how to hug. They fully engage both arms. They close their eyes. I mean, I'm kind of a nerd that I pick up on things like that. But that really adds to their warmth and their charm and their down to earthiness. You just know that they're real people. And I think, I was telling my wife the other day, I think it would have been very easy for, as brilliant as Pete is, to fall into or to get into academia or anything like that, where it's more of an insular community, a smaller community, and be wonky all the time with other wonks. But Chasten is the person that really keeps him grounded, and who is just, normal people. And that's really a plus. That's really a positive thing. That's like the perfect marriage of, the brilliant and the real. So, and then I hope everyone has had a chance to see the Medium article that Pete wrote about the twins' first year. How all that struggles, with their first getting them and all the struggles with their health issues and everything. That's another thing that, makes you realize how grounded they are and how their friends and their family have really rallied around them. And that keeps you humble and keeps it real too. And again, that stays a warm place in your heart, that hopefully that will always be the case.
Yeah, I did read that, and that was very touching. And I think I got teary-eyed a few times just reading that, the whole part about in the hospital. And I can't imagine the anguish that they went through, just trying to figure out if their kid's gonna live or die. It's just horrible. Are you a parent or no?
We are not. No. No. Two cats.
Those are your kids.
I hate the term furry kids, but we call them the kits, because they're fairly new. They were born in February. A boy and a girl from the same litter, and that we adopted from our local animal shelter. And so we call them the kits instead of the kids. So.
Okay. Well, that's quite a handful already, right?
They can be. They can be. Yeah. I won't tell you some of the nicknames that I have for them. Not really applicable or good for a family podcast that someone might be listening to with children in the car.
All right. Well, I think our time is almost up. Is up. So thank you so much, Marsha, for joining me today. I really, really enjoyed it. And just connecting with other Pete supporters is, this podcast has been so fun for me, just talking to people and getting their stories out. And I feel like everyone has their story, but somehow along the way, there's always something that connects all of us. And that's our love of Pete and community and friendship that we've created through this group. So thank you so much for sharing your time with me today. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Thanks so much, Kim. I appreciate the opportunity and I'm very honored to have been asked, and would just encourage everyone who's listening to get out there just when you think you can't do anything more. Do a little bit more, write a few extra postcards, reach out to your county Democratic chair. He or she would be very fortunate to have you and to know that they can count on you, whether that's for monetary support or any of your time, talent, treasure that you're willing to share. It's appreciated.
Yeah. All right. Good deal. Let's get to work, right?
That's right. No time to waste.
That's right. Okay. All right. Thank you, Marsha.
Thanks.
If you've enjoyed this conversation, please be sure to subscribe so this channel can grow and I'll be able to share more stories with you each week. Thank you for listening.